Welcome to Future Talk. To be successful in today's competitive business world, one has to constantly innovate, constantly find new and better ways to do things. My guest today describes himself as an innovation catalyst. Thomas J. Buckholtz has worked with companies large and small, pioneering new technologies, helping their employees to become more innovative and achieve greater personal effectiveness, and saving the companies hundreds of millions of dollars in the process. He's the author of a book called Create Crucial Insight, which explains his system for catalyzing innovation. He also has a PhD in physics from the University of California, Berkeley, with undergraduate work at Caltech, and has written a book tackling some of the hardest questions in modern physics. But today, we're going to focus on his system for enhancing productivity. Tom, welcome to the program.
Marty, thank you very much for having me on the show.
And it's my pleasure, and let me start by asking you the first question. You call yourself an innovation catalyst. What exactly does that mean?
It summarizes the idea that I've been in many situations in which people together did things that were really not expected, that were really quite beneficial. And those situations have varied tremendously, some in small companies, some in large companies, some in government, a little bit out in society, not-for-profit, and even in the environment. I've just been very lucky to have helped people and organizations innovate successfully.
So how do you teach people how to innovate? Is this something that most people are capable of doing, but they just need a little coaching?
I think that most people are capable of innovating. I think people are born with a natural curiosity and abilities to do things, and I think that those skills and proclivities are retained, although sometimes suppressed. So I think it's relatively easy. It turns out that from the various situations I've been involved in, including ones in which we actually had the necessity and luxury to think about innovation and how to innovate better, I have developed some checklists or systems thinking tools that people can use, and I hope that people will use them to, first of all, look at what they're doing and maybe try to find something a little bit bigger, a little bit more impactful, a little bit more potentially significant, and then to actually, whatever they choose to do better at whatever they're doing.
Well, can you give me an example of a company you worked for where you made a difference in their outcome and what you did there to help?
Yes, let me take the example of having led a company-wide grassroots innovation program at Pacific Gas and Electric during the 1980s. The situation was wonderful. I was invited to join the computer department. People knew personal computing and other new technology was coming, and they weren't quite sure what to do with it. So it turns out that I led a company-wide grassroots innovation program, and to go to the sort of a bottom line for this before getting into details, after less than 3.5 years with the company, I gave a talk to precisely the officers of the company. And amazingly enough, I had worked with each one of them except the general counsel, so they all knew me. And I was able to report a punchline to the talk, which was, we have 5,000 computers. I've spent $20 million of the company's money, and you here in this room have signed off on recurring annual benefits of $100 million. Now, that was approximately 1.5% of revenue, and that's a kind of achievement that any large company would really like to have. And it was based on the ideas, the drive, the proclivity of people throughout the company, some clerks, some directors, people with titles in between, who came up with ideas for doing their own work better or for how people around them could do work better, and stepped up with a concept, and we backed them with some technology, and they did the work, they achieved the successes.
Is it about people cooperating with each other, knowing the jobs of other people near them so they can work more synergistically?
Things like that are definitely elements of this. There were individual successes, but many of the projects involved work groups or even work that was done throughout a 90,000 square mile service territory.
Well, what usually hinders innovation? When you go to a company and they're not innovative and they're very inefficient, what is usually the problem? What's the bottleneck holding things up?
There are many possibilities, and it's easy to generalize, but one really has to look at specific cases. Sometimes busyness has taken over from a broader perspective of business, so people are just doing what they think they have to do. Sometimes there's a climate of fear, and people are not willing to take risks. On the flip side of that, sometimes there are climates in which risk-taking is actually encouraged. There can be cultural things. There are societal cultures in which it is said that people, at least as individuals, will be very unlikely to stand up and say, I've got a new idea. In some of those cultures, one looks and says, if we couch this opportunity as a team opportunity, might that be better? And often that's a better way to approach things. So you kind of look around and see what's going on, what could happen, and encourage people to do what's appropriate in their own situations.
So do companies hire you specifically to improve the quality of their employees and get them to think more about their job and make more productive decisions?
That can be the case. The situations I think we'll probably talk about mostly here are ones in which I was actually an employee or close to being an employee in an organization, as it was with PG&E. And I like to talk about those because I saw from the inside what was going on and generated perspective over a reasonable period of time. And with PG&E it was really nice. They gave me some executive education about the utility industry and about a sort of mini MBA program at Stanford for a couple of weeks, and at something called Public Utility Executive Program at Michigan for 4 weeks. So it was a good opportunity to see much beyond the company, and indeed I wound up actually talking about the success of our overall project and a new business practice that we pioneered for the world software marketplace with the media and eventually in public interviews and so forth.
Now, you wrote a book called Create Crucial Insight. You have a copy of it right there. Maybe you could hold it up to the camera. Okay, so create crucial insight. Does that mean that there is some kind of insight that you're trying to pass along to your clients, and once they have this insight, they'll be more personally effective?
That's a true statement, but the insight that I'm passing along is insight on how to generate your own insight. Because what really counts is people in their own situations creating crucial, better insight than they would have had before, and then using that to go into developing plans, to taking actions, to recognizing the outcomes that they've produced, and to reusing things.
Can you give an example of how you've helped someone gain an insight which they were then able to use?
Yes. Let me take one example. This is a sales and marketing example, and in this case it was a startup, and they had actually collected 3 pieces of software. I think they bought one of them from somebody else, and then 2 pieces came together some other way. I think they coded at least one of those. And they all worked together in some way, but they couldn't figure out, or they hadn't figured out, how to explain the value proposition to their customers, or their would-be customers, because they didn't really have any at that point, and to the people they wanted to invest. So it was quite possible, using one of these checklists, to ask the question, what are the customers really going to be doing, put that at the outcomes level in one of these lists, and then work back down the list, what do the customers need to accomplish or have accomplished for them in order to get to those outcomes, and then to look at the 3 pieces of software and ask, where do those services fit within these categories? So it's possible to then to envision what people were really doing, and to come up with a practical, or would be doing with the software, and to come up with a practical vision for the value added by each of those pieces of software, and then to think about how to market the practicality of it. This does not get the emotional side of it. That's something I encourage people to look at in their messaging tremendously also, but it did get them through a stumbling block, which was we don't understand how to explain the practical value of what we have to offer.